Hello, in this video we'll be exploring the JSONB columns, JSONB support in PostgreSQL. Very simple concept which lets you explore all the sort of JSON data that you might store in your Postgres database. It's a relatively straightforward arrangement. There will be a few changes in the structure, in the setup, in the context setup, and we will be building on the same project we had in the previous video. To get started, we had this product setup, which essentially is our table, the product table. And previously, we just had the ID, the name, the stock, and created that. So we explored the migrations, and if you want to learn about that setup, watch the previous video in this series. We will later move on in the future videos to something like vectors and all those sort of arrangements. But for now, we're sticking to simple columns and expanding to JSON columns. So for this example, we just added metadata and tags. These will be our JSON columns, and we'll need to describe them in the AppDB context to be actual JSON columns, not just some simple property or something of that nature, because then you would have to convert to string and it would be very annoying. But because we have JSONB support in the actual database here, we don't have to do that. We can just set it up as JSONB. So all your properties here in this class will be stored as JSON, and then you'll be able to explore them, query them as JSON, not just as a simple string and converting that or searching through the string as text, which would be not so efficient. So that's what makes it all more efficient and just in general more developer friendly in a way. So we have this product metadata class, and as you can see, as far as JSON files go, this will be quite complex one. We have color, we have brand, just a few simple properties, but then we also have dimensions. So there will be a list in the JSON, a sort of complex list, and then we have a simple list of strings, and then we have a dictionary as well. So basically everything we can see in a JSON file we will have in this example. Now, this is the example. We have the sort of columns, JSONB columns here, metadata, tags, all that we have set up. Now it's time to actually set the AppDB context to accept the JSONB column as an actual JSONB column, not just as some random thing or as a string. So let's move to the AppDB context. So currently from a previous video, we have a bit of a setup for the name, the maximum length on the table. We have a precision for the decimal, just a few basic things. Now we need to actually add the support for JSON column, and it will work exactly in the same way, just a difference of declaration. We have this precision, so now we do entity, and then we do property as we did before. And you would probably just copy paste them usually, and we actually kind of have this suggestion, and we will take a suggestion and we'll remove some of it. But as you can see, we have sort of customization that you can do. We won't get into that, and in general you shouldn't need this customization for the conversion. That will add complexity, that may ruin the performance, and you may come up with edge cases where you will have problems with all these customized things. So this, of course, is just default. It doesn't actually do any customization as such, but preferably do avoid that because it can cause problems. All you really need to do, let's remove this part, is do this: HasColumnType JSONB. So that's going to be your specific column type and your actual object that we have here in product.cs, the product class. Your product metadata property here will simply map to this column, and it will be as JSONB column. Now the same we can simply copy down and do this for the tags. The tags we also want to store as a list. And anything that's not just a simple value, you should be using JSONB columns because it becomes more efficient. So any list, just a simple list, in this case, of course, we have metadata for a more complex JSON file as such, and then we have tags. Now, of course, there are other databases, perhaps like MongoDB or something like that, where you would probably have a better benefit of using those in terms of JSON, but those should only be used only when your whole thing is JSON based. So perhaps you have some massive log outputs, pricing things. Those can be stored in those databases. This is still a structured database, but you can have that bit of support for things like metadata, for things like certain perhaps additional log information. All those things can go into JSON because you probably won't query them all that often, but it's very useful. It's very easy to pull them as a whole without querying them. Of course, you can do that as well, and we'll get to that in this video. Now, we should also add a few indexes here, so it's a bit faster. And the way we will do that, it will be quite simple here. We will do entity, and then we will do hasIndex. This is how you add indexes for anything. Now, you can do this for all of these types, not just JSONB, but we'll focus on JSONB this time. We'll probably have a performance-based video in this series later on. In a few weeks that will be released, so quite an interesting thing. But for JSON, you should always have at least something because it will be quite large, and if you're actually going to query it, it can become a bit cumbersome on the performance side. So we have hasIndex on the, in this case, let's do metadata like that, and the method will be gin. We can take that. So the gin index, it's a sort of kind of a method for indexing specific one, and you can specify them, and you can do that not just again on JSON but on other arrangements as well. And we'll do, just in case, the same thing on the tags like that. So again, we'll get to that a bit more in the later videos, what options are available and what not, and what should be used on what. But for JSONB, we like to use gin. That's good enough, and that works well for that specific arrangement. Now, this is the setup as far as the actual model go, the entity, right, the database set, or rather the column, right? That's all you need to do. You need to set the JSONB as column type. You need to have a proper object that would work as JSON. Of course, anything would work, but again, as long as it's not something straightforward like a single number, a piece of text, it's actually got a bit of structure to it. Even if it's just a list, it's worth doing the JSONB column. It will have a bit better performance, and you'll be able to query it a lot easier. So this is done. Now the only thing we have to do is do a few sort of setup tweaks in the program.cs, because you need to enable it properly, and then we'll take a look at a few queries as well. Now, before we go into the program.cs, we will need to apply this new migration. So just like in the previous video, the initial one, we have a new migration, and again, we covered the files that you shouldn't touch, what it creates. But now we add a new migration to add meta tags and metadata. Again, this name you can call whatever you want, but in general, the code will always stay the same. This is a little script. You have a context, you have, in this case, AppDB context. Whatever context you have, you can have multiple ones. We covered that in the previous video. If you want to learn more about migrations in general, watch that video. And then we have a specific project, because you could have several projects, and then you could also have a startup project as well. So we apply this migration, and that creates those tables in the database, the JSONB columns in this case, not a new table, but JSONB column in the existing one. And it all is handled with this EF core migration arrangement, nothing you need to do manually. Now that we have that, we can jump into the program.cs, And here we have already the previous setup, which we'll need to modify slightly. And you will be modifying these setups based on what you add. Again, once we get to vectors, there will be some different things as well. So it's something important to learn that it does change a bit. But here, instead of this, we will still have the DB context and still work the same, but we just need to add a little option here. And just to make it easier, we can kind of move this a bit further on. And let's create a little builder of a proper data source. So we can have that a sort of separation of things here. So let's do a variable and let's call it data, let's say source builder, because that's what it is. We'll be building a data source and we will replace the current one with that new one essentially. So let's do new, and then we do Npgsql data source builder. This should be somewhere here. Let's see, Npgsql data source builder right here. We have that, and we have a little suggestion here which we should actually take. That's all we need here. We have that. So this is our connection in the builder part. And now we need to add a little option. That's all we need, actually. We don't need to do anything else, and we don't even need this arrangement, but it's easier. So we use enable. See right here, we have quite a few options, really. We have EnableDynamicJson, we have enable parameter logging. Perhaps we'll get to some of those in the later stages of this whole arrangement in a later video. But for now, we just need EnableDynamicJson, and that's it. So that will create our arrangement, and then we create the data source, right, like this. Data source builder, build. So we can have all the options set up, and then we can actually apply the data source, where we have add DB context, we add the context, and instead of a simple connection string, we use data source like that with our enabled dynamic JSON option, which enables us to use all those JSON columns and more importantly use the queries on them. So query the actual arrangement in the column, not just anything around it, or just get the data in there. It can still exist if you don't have this, but you won't be able to query it properly. So you need to add this. And besides that, everything stays the same, and now we can go down here and get started with actual filtering and finding things in the JSONB columns. Now for the queries, let's just do a few simple ones, something quite straightforward. Let's say we want to have a product, right? So let's expand on this a bit. Let's say metadata filtered. And then let's create a little map get, app map get. Again, this is sort of minimal API arrangement. If you don't know how that is, doesn't matter too much. You can watch videos to learn how minimal API works. And at some point, we will probably do a Blazor server because there is some connection arrangement. It's a bit different. So we will look at that as well with all these PostgreSQL arrangements, but this is what we have: app_map.get, or rather app.mapget, and we can actually take this suggestion. This is exactly what we need. A very simple arrangement, a very straightforward arrangement. So what the database now allows you to do is simply have your DB context and be able to have the data as your C# class definition, right? Your object here in C#, but at the same time as a JSONB, as a JSON structure in your database. So here we have metadata, we have color, and we will be filtering products based on color. Now that's where the index comes in, because it's important to index it properly, so it's not a heavy procedure, because again, these files, in this case, it's probably not going to be a huge file, but at some point it can become really humongous, so it might become quite troublesome. But this is how you do that, and there is no sort of real additional thing here. We added the setup, the declaration in the AppDB context in this case, or the database context in general, whatever it would be called. We have that. Other than that, you just filter it like you would have any list of something in LINQ. All those filters will be applicable. Again, as long as you set up EnableDynamicJson and also you set it up properly in the AppDB context, in the database context, in the products, DB set here, we have JSONB column. So if you have a JSONB column, you have the structure correct. You need to always make sure and verify what you actually write in there. Then you should be able to filter it quite easily. And as far as anything else goes, it's just simple link arrangement. When you're inserting the data, we had this, let's see right here, map post. There's absolutely no change at all. You could, of course, pull the product and update just the metadata and use the save changes without the no tracking, because remember, we have as no tracking right here. So if you pull a reference products here, you won't be able to actually save the edits if it says no tracking. If it is with tracking, so remove this, then you can save it and you can just access the metadata like that. Just make sure you save it properly. There will be errors if you don't save it properly, if sort of the structure is missing from the JSON. That will throw you an error usually, but do be very careful what you actually save and how you assign and reassign all those things as well. Now in the later videos we'll take a look at the vectorizing, how we can get some data, some articles, and put them into vectorized database and sort of have perhaps a little chatbot or something of that nature. Do all those things and a few other details like performance, basically everything Postgres related. And with that said, we will conclude this video.